Wayne is just asking for some general guidance. He says he is new to Team Azon Pro and just getting started. He owns Fresh Store Builder and was wondering where to start with my training. Well, I do have a standalone Fresh Store Builder training course in the Team Azon Pro member area. That would probably be a good initial place to begin, simply because you are using Fresh Store Builder, assuming you do want to build your entire site that way. My main recommendation with Fresh Store Builder is simply to don't rely too much on all the automated features. Everybody using that software will typically just be using it to generate their Amazon store pages, and ultimately you want to have a bunch of additional unique content that's going to help you to bring in search engine traffic relating to the products that you are trying to sell. My Fresh Store Builder course will go through all that stuff for you and teach you about different aspects of the software, how to customize the different areas of it, how to put your own custom content, how to do a little bit of a custom design on the site, things of that nature. Beyond the Fresh Store Builder training, I would also recommend, once you have completed that, you could go on and do some of my standalone Amazon training courses to learn my approach a little more in depth. The Azon Masterclass 1 and also the Azon 30-day challenge. Either of those would be a good pick. If you're comfortable with HTML and CSS, not necessarily even writing it yourself, but just being able to make some modifications based on recommendations that I provide, then the Azon Masterclass 1 I think is a good way to go, but it's a little more technically oriented, while the Azon 30-day challenge is pretty similar, but it tries to completely avoid anything technical in that course. So while those two courses might not be the exact method that you would want to carry out using the Fresh Store Builder software, by going through the Fresh Store Builder training and then looking at one of those other two Amazon courses of mine to learn all of my tactics as far as research and content, picking out keywords that you want to target, how to go about putting that content on your website and linking it all together. All that kind of training will be found in those standalone Amazon courses. So you would kind of just want to apply those tactics to what you're doing in Fresh Store Builder. All of those things is quite a bit of training to begin. I would just, for somebody that's just starting out, if you've never used Fresh Store Builder before, there is a bit of a learning curve that goes along with that. It is a pretty complicated piece of software that has a ton of different options. And so trying to learn the software and my Amazon tactics all at the same time can sometimes be a little overwhelming for somebody just starting. So you could certainly begin on Azon Masterclass 1. That's going to basically teach you the approach using WordPress and using my Amazon software. And then the Fresh Store Builder training would essentially be teaching you how to take my Amazon tactics and apply it to the Fresh Store Builder software. So if you've never used Fresh Store Builder before, starting with Azon Masterclass 1 may be the best way to go there, just so you don't have to learn too many new things all at one time. You're quite welcome, Wayne. Please feel free to reach out and get in touch. Either I'm here every month on these Q&A sessions, or you can also reach support through the support link that's up at the top of the Team Azon Pro website. That does not go directly to me. I do have support staff that takes care of that, but it's a long time Amazon student of mine that actually does that. And so he gives pretty good advice on his own. If he's not sure about something, he always comes to me to make sure to get the right kind of an answer. So he can provide guidance type of answers through the support system that way too. Hello, Tina. How are you doing today? Good to see you here, as always. Hope all is going well for you. That's a good question, Wayne. I do get that question fairly often from people, especially when they're first getting started. He's curious, when you're getting started building Amazon sites or stores, what's a realistic expectation for earnings each month? He realizes that it's kind of a just depends type of question, but he's trying to get a ballpark because he's not sure if an average site earns, say, $10 a month or thousands per month. In a lot of ways, it is certainly one of those just depends kind of a situations. The niche that you select can heavily affect that. The type of Amazon site that you're building can also heavily affect that. The way I answer that question for people, though, is just based off of the tactics that I teach. Using Azon Masterclass 1, for example. That type of a site is roughly a 20-page website. So it's not very big. If you get used to the strategy and can move through the writing fairly quickly, you can put together one of those 20-page sites in about 4 days or so. With those kind of sites, I have found that on average, they make somewhere in the neighborhood of the low performing ones, maybe about $30 a month. The high performing ones can be $200, $300, $400 a month. And that's just building this 20-page website, putting it out there on the internet, and then leaving it alone. Never going back to it except for maybe to do some maintenance once every 6 months to a year to make sure you're still promoting products that are actually still selling and are available, things of that nature. So with that said, if you have a particular website that's performing really well, you can certainly expand that website and get it to make a lot more. There are definitely a lot of sites that make thousands of dollars from just one single site each month. However, those sites are definitely going to be larger sites that require a lot more time spent on them. So hopefully that gives you some kind of a ballpark figure. If you're using my Azon Masterclass 1 as an example, you should be able to move through those sites fairly quickly once you get the strategy down. And the goal there, since you're building fairly fast websites that don't require much maintenance, is to just keep making them. You make one, you put it out there, you move on to the next one. Then you're building up a portfolio of websites. You can have 10, 20 of them, you can have 50 or 100 of them. That way, whatever you're trying to get your income to, you basically just continue building sites until your average monthly income gets up to that level. And depending on what you're shooting for, obviously that can take more or less time. You still have the factor of getting paid from Amazon. That's always worth considering, just in case you are expecting to be able to make money by a particular date, for example. If during the month of May right now, let's say you could earn $1,000 on Amazon, it would actually be the beginning of August when that money was deposited into your bank account. So once you've earned the money at the end of the month, then you end up waiting 60 days to actually get paid that. Once you're earning a decent amount every month, you kind of forget that that's even happening because you're getting a payment every single month. But obviously when you're first getting started, it's ultimately 2 to 3 months worth of doing stuff and not seeing any kind of earnings in your pocket from it, even if you are still making earnings during that time period. It just takes a while before you actually start getting paid. So I do recommend to people to at least consider that, to factor it into their plans. That way they don't, get blindsided, or let's say you're in between jobs or something like that. I certainly don't try to give anybody unrealistic expectations for doing this type of stuff. It's a great way to make a hands-free income, but it takes a lot of work and effort to get to the point where it is a hands-free income. That sounds very reasonable, Wayne. Wanting to build slow and steady to ultimately replace your day job. My advice would just be to, try to set aside a certain amount of time, each day after work, or certain amount of time each week to devote to working on building new websites, and just try to increase your portfolio to have a decent number of sites. And after you can step back and kind of look at how your sites are performing, try to single out one or two that are doing exceptionally well and a lot better than the other ones are, and consider expansions on those sites. My my latest course that I added, Azon Overhaul, deals with expansions of websites. So you can take one of those sites that's performing super good and get it to do even better for you. Oh, you're quite welcome, Wayne. Okay, Tina is asking about Weaver. Um, my let me start with your second question there, Tina, and then I'll go back to the first one. As far as a Weaver course goes, um, I made a really involved one for Weaver 2, and the the follow-up to that, which was for the new Weaver Extreme, I believe that was done in the Azon 30-day challenge, if I'm not mistaken. While the Weaver Extreme training in the 30-day challenge may not be as in-depth as the original one, it more or less just tries to point out the things that are different, some of the stuff that's moved. Um, Ultimately, though, a lot of the stuff that was available in the original or in Weaver 2 is often still found in the new Weaver. It just may be in a different location or something of that nature. I have thought about doing. Okay, you have the plus version. You know, I've never even used the plus version. That's the upgraded one, right? I've always just used the free version. So at least as far as features that would be different from the normal Weaver Extreme to Weaver Extreme Plus, um, I have never used those personally and wouldn't actually be able to help with those types of things. As far as making maybe a standalone or a more involved course on at least the Weaver Extreme part, that is something I have considered doing and may try to get done in the coming couple of months or so. Um, my immediate next release on Team Azon Pro is going to be a course on site hacking, though. I'd have to go back and look at my notes to see if I planned something coming after that yet or not, but that should be out pretty soon, like between now and the end of the month. I don't recall if I set a date on that for getting published yet or not. For your site, let me pull it up here on my other screen. You said you were wanting to get rid of the block look to it, too narrow for you. Um, are you basically, you're referring to how, like, when you're looking at it on a browser, how everything is just in boxes, or that it's not taking up, say, the full width of the browser? Wasn't quite sure which one you might be referring to. Okay, okay, I think I see what you're talking about. It it might not just be one particular setting that I could direct you to try to correct something like that. Um, if you do want it wider, it's okay to do that just as long as um, you can test it out and make sure that it is kind of scaling to the size of the browser. Um, let me use this site of mine here just as an example. On this website, you're talking about making, say, from this corner up to this corner for this to take up more space, more width, right? In addition to getting rid of kind of the box look of it. If you make, yeah, I know what you mean. On one hand, it does seem kind of narrow the way that it is. It seems to be done that way to be compatible with maybe a wider variety of screen resolutions, and also to, at least for somebody with a, say, a high def computer monitor, which as far as I can tell seems to be pretty much standard now when you do buy a computer, where you end up with a screen kind of like what you're seeing here, where you have a big chunk on the left and a big chunk on the right that's just missing. expanding it out can, give you more room, but it certainly crowds up the page with more stuff and can sometimes make it harder to be able to find the information that you're looking for. The other thing to consider is whether or not your site is mobile responsive, to where if you are making it wider and somebody then visits your site on their cell phone, is that going to affect the way that they are able to view the site? It's pretty easy to test. Weaver is mobile responsive, as you can see here, for example. As my site shrinks in size, my sidebar actually doesn't disappear. Well, yeah, actually it does disappear in the mobile version for the settings I have on this particular site. The menu gets shortened into more of a mobile menu. As long as you can shrink and expand the size of your site and it looks okay still, there's certainly nothing wrong with increasing the width of it. There are Weaver settings that allow you to do that, but sometimes changing the overall width of your site like that can sometimes mess with other things. Like it kind of just depends on like what your header is like. If you have a large header image that stretches across the whole thing and you make it wider, how is that going to fit into it? What, will it still remain center if you make your site even wider than that? The main thing that I try to do though, I usually don't worry about trying to make my site even wider than it already is, even though I am kind of on the same page as you as far as that goes. When I first started using WordPress to make sites, before that, when I just coded sites myself manually, I always made them full width of the screen. For the most part, there may have been a few exceptions to that. So then when I got to this, I did feel like it was really, really narrow. In a lot of cases, I'll find myself not using the sidebar in WordPress, especially when I'm not on the home page. Like, here's my home page, and I'm using the sidebar here. But on a lot of additional pages of my website, I'll oftentimes have the sidebar disabled just to give me some more width to work with for the content itself. As far as the boxy look goes, I see on your site that you have already utilized like rounded corners, for example, at least up at the top of the site. I think a lot of the boxy look that you're getting on your particular website, though, may actually have to do with just the color, the design of the site. Let's see, including the background of the site itself, and just counting background colors, I think I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe seven different background colors potentially that are used at some point on that one page. I would just try to reduce that number. Go with backgrounds that allow that element to more or less blend in with the rest of the page. For example, I could certainly have set, say, a sidebar background that would be behind all of these, but that would make them end up looking kind of blocky with the rest of the site, kind of like what you're referring to. At least in my experiences with using WordPress, that seems to be the easiest way to go about it. I would just mess with a lot of your background colors, reduce the number of them that you use, make your header one background color. Honestly, you might even be able to since you have a header image on your site, you might be able to wipe out the actual text for your header. The text that's above it, the name of the site, and then the description for the site as well. That's called site title and tagline, I believe, within the Weaver settings. They're fairly easy to disable. You just have to find the checkbox for it, and it's within those Weaver settings, right in the same area, I'm pretty sure, where the header image settings are too, in the Weaver admin. And then the menu I think would be okay to leave as a different color from everything else. A lot of the rest of that, though, the kind of tan color and the white color, I'd probably pick one or the other. Maybe make that entire area just solid white. Down into the footer, you might even make that light blue background a solid white too, so it blends in with the top. You'd still have the boxes for those widgets down on the bottom, doing it that way, but just a couple of simple changes like that would make it a lot less boxy than it currently appears. Oh, I see. You may, on one hand, I hate to recommend this because I don't want it to cause you to mess up any of your settings or anything. In Weaver though, it might just be the sub theme that you have selected. However, before you decide to possibly play around with using a different sub theme, keep in mind that if you do change the sub theme, it's probably going to wipe out any designing that you have already done. I believe in the original Weaver 2 training, I teach how to create a backup of your Weaver theme settings that could then be restored. If you wanted to attempt to try to change the sub-theme, I would highly recommend to back up those settings first, because even if you wanted to switch back to the one you're already using, it might not look the same once you get back to it. You might have to restore those settings after you did something like that. Just as one, possible suggestion, if it's the layout of everything that you're really not liking, sometimes just picking a different sub-theme can be easier than changing all the different settings to try to get it to look the way that you want. To a certain extent, though, you kind of can take any sub-theme and mess with a bunch of different settings in Weaver and even make it look like another one of the sub-themes. The sub-themes, the main difference between them just seems to be the various settings and stuff that they use to control the design. Or even try it on a different site first if you're, set up a new site just as a test bed or something, and try out each of the different sub-themes to see what it looks like, to see what the arrangement is like, to know for sure whether you would, potentially want to switch or not before actually trying to make that change on an actual site you were working on. As far as CSS and HTML and PHP and stuff like that goes, I'm assuming you've probably seen the Techie Masterclass. it really just goes into basics of a lot of those types of languages, so you can learn to kind of design your own site or make custom changes to it. To a certain extent, though, um, it's very feasible once you know the basic syntax, especially of a language like CSS, to where you know how to put it into your site. Then it's just a matter of coming up with the different commands to and the values to accomplish what you want to accomplish. You can usually just Google that kind of stuff, if you want to change the size of a certain piece of text, Google CSS change size of text or size of text or something like that. For years, it's been a long time, but when I first learned those types of things, that's exactly how I learned it. I had a website, and I would have something particular about it I would want to change, and I'd go out and Google on how to do that in, say CSS or HTML or something like that. And just kind of learned piece by piece, bit by bit that way over time. Yeah, yeah, editing PHP files gets a lot more tricky, for sure. Um, I think HTML and CSS is a good place to start learning, because you can accomplish pretty much any kind of designing you want to do with that kind of stuff. And then PHP really gets more into being able to change the way stuff works, whereas HTML and CSS is more about changing the way stuff looks. Oh, I see. Yeah, some themes are not very customizable, and seemingly the only way to accomplish something is to edit the theme. That's why I ended up going with Weaver after a while of using WordPress, because Weaver just offered a lot of those customizations without having to edit the theme. And it's not that I'm not capable of editing the theme. I'm more than capable of completely reprogramming a theme if I want to. But the problem then comes into, as soon as you edit the file of a theme or a plugin or one of your core WordPress files or something like that, then you can no longer update it, because otherwise you're just going to wipe out your custom changes. But then once you can't update, then you're essentially left with the responsibility of keeping that up to date yourself, ensuring that it still works, ensuring that it makes adjustments with new versions of WordPress that get released. There's all kinds of stuff that go into trying to keep a piece of software or something like that up to date. And so I do try to recommend to avoid that kind of stuff when it's at all possible. Yeah, and that makes it even more difficult, just having to, kind of do trial by error and keep restoring backups all the time and stuff like that. Being able to avoid PHP, you can avoid having to do a lot of that kind of stuff, though. If anyone has additional questions for me, please feel free to punch it in the chat box for me at any time. Just want to make sure for everyone else that's there to let you know that you can still go ahead and ask questions if you have them.